You are now listening to Stranger Times.
Hello and welcome to Stranger Times. I'm your host, Jacob Carson, and today we are joined by Andy McGrillen from That UFO Podcast and UAP Media UK. So how are you doing, man? And congratulations on all the recent success with the podcast. You've been chatting.
Thanks, yeah. I still don't know what to say when people say about success. I'm like, success is relative, isn't it? But it's still weird, yeah. It's people listen. I'm still amazed when anyone gets in touch or emails or tweets me or DMs me or whatever. Like, I think I've got a little bit better at getting back to people on that side of things. So, but no, thank you. It's good to come on podcast. I think that's like one of my favorite things from me starting mine is anyone asking me to go on theirs. I'm like, oh, that's nice. It's like a real high compliment for me. So
yeah. It's fun as well, isn't it? Because you sometimes when you're like running your own show, you've got like all the logistics of it, and you've got to make sure that it like runs well, and you've got to make sure that if your fans want certain things, you've got to make sure you've got those questions and all that kind of stuff. And it is quite fun just to go on someone else's show and just talk about things that you're passionate about. So I get that.
Yeah, it's like the pressure's off, because if this is bad, it's on you, not me. So I've got no editing, nothing, no questions to put together. I don't have to worry about missing off questions and making it fit a time and everything. So yeah, it's.
But no, it's awesome to see a podcast as well that's UK based on this subject doing well as well, because usually it's quite like an American topic, isn't it? And I know you guys at UAP Media UK are like working really hard to like change that stigma and stuff, but it's definitely a good thing. And I think the more the merrier, really. I think in the next like year, especially like with lockdown and stuff, I think I've heard you talk about this before. Like, I think we're going to see a big rise in people, like we're seeing, getting interested in this topic and like wanting to create content for it, which is always a good thing. It's kind of what you want.
Yeah, and you know, I'm going to be consistent, and I always say this whenever someone says about you guys at UAP Media UK doing lots of hard work. They do hard work, I don't, right? I am the one who does the least in the whole group, and they're all really nice and polite and won't acknowledge that to my face, but they do the hard work and everything. I just go along every so often and go, yeah, that sounds good. Like, do you need me to do anything? No, that's fine. So those guys do a lot of graft on that. Obviously, I've got the podcast, which covers a lot of ground and helps promote UAP Media UK and everything that entails, and the Twitter account, which is great. But those guys do a lot of the kind of hard work that maybe doesn't get the praise yet it should. And that's not from people like yourself or anyone on Twitter who's looking at UAP Media. That's not necessarily what it's for. Right now, it's trying to get journalists and politicians, and that is what they're actively doing. And we're in a lot of dialogues with different people and different newspapers and organisations, and it is still that stigma that some of them just aren't there yet. I was tweeting a journalist the other day from a newspaper in Glasgow, who's just done a piece on UFOs, and it was good to see it in this paper that I know well. I won't name it and stuff just now, but
yeah.
The piece got a few things wrong, and it generalised a few things as well. And I tweeted just to say, oh, it was really great to see it in this type of press, and it was a paper I read kind of growing up and stuff. And do you know what? If you ever wanted to speak in future, I hooked her up to the group's website and the name and stuff. And if you want to speak to me or anyone from the group and get some comments, talk about UFOs, you totally can. And I just mentioned, just so you know, the task force report coming up, it's not this and it's not this, this is what it is.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh yeah, no, that's great, thanks. And I'll let you know. And it's like, yeah. But that's kind of where we're at in the UK just now with it.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I was chatting to Dave last week, and we were both saying how it's really cool to see like the BBC and the Guardian and stuff actually doing a couple of articles on it, because there's been such a huge influx in like the last like 2 months especially. And it's quite funny because especially like with me, to like some of my friends and some of my family members, I've always kind of thought about it and wanted to talk about this topic, but it's never really like wanted to crop up kind of thing. And recently it's like cropping up more, and I keep getting messages from people being like, do you know what's going on? I'm like, absolutely not. I'm kind of just open-minded to the conversation. I'm willing to talk about it, see where it kind of goes. And I just think it's a good thing. Like you're saying, like we're seeing a change of like perception in the UK, especially like a lot more in America. But I do feel like even with this report, I know that they're not going to like outright come out and be like the extraterrestrials exist or anything like that. But I think it will do like really good stuff for the UK media, because I think, well, you'd hope in a way it's going to snowball, won't you? Or like it'll push other countries to come out with reports as well.
See, for me, it's like I'm looking at your background and you've got your Pokemon and your Funko Pops and all that kind of stuff. So you're into like your gaming and geeky stuff, like kind of like myself in a lot of ways, right? And it's like, for me, it's like a computer game where we're going to get this report and it's not going to take us to the last level of what we're trying to do or get out.
Yeah.
It's going to take us to the next level. How far it takes us, I don't know. Let's get micro detail, or like you remember Mario, where there was one, I think it's Super Mario World, you could actually skip a level near the start. You could jump to level 3, I think, instead of going to level 2. And do you know what? It might take us to level 3 if right now we're on level 1, but it's probably going to take us to level 2. And it just gets us to that next bit of the conversation. I will tell you now, there will be a ton of disappointment on the day, no matter what comes out, right? It's not going to talk about ETs, like you say. It's not going to talk about crypto terrestrials, ultra terrestrials, different dimensions, probably won't mention different realities, anything like that. The best and I think I've said this from the start, while I've went up and down on different things as we've went along, the best I really think we can hope for is within the body of it, or just a summary at the end, it gives the possibility of it being non-human intelligence, which is still a stretch when you think of that language, right? But just to say this might be something we haven't considered, just even something like that for me would blow the topic open. Maybe not in the way a lot of people want, but enough you're going to get journalists who don't want to touch it yet, who are keeping an eye on it. They'll pick up on that language and that line and that change in terminology, and they'll go, wait, what do you mean by this? Because that's the kind of stuff they'll be happy to walk into a Pentagon press conference or a White House press conference, Department of Defense, and go, you released this report, okay, we've not talked about aliens, but what do you mean by something else or non-human intelligence? Like, that's the conversation. You want these questions being asked, and that puts the pressure on it to snowball. So for me, it's going to be a next step. And I tweeted that out today, that it's just kind of waiting to see what comes out on the report in the next week, to see how we kind of go forward with the conversation.
I think as well, like for everybody that's kind of like outside like the UFO Twitter or like interested in this phenomenon, I think like even like you're saying, even if they just come out and they're saying like, yeah, it's non-human intelligence, that will probably like blow a lot of people's minds, because in the world that they live in, it's like completely different. You know what I mean? Like this is very, very new. And to a lot of people, they're not even willing to like discuss this for whatever reason. It might be philosophical, social, religious. And for the government to even acknowledge it, like you're saying, I think is huge, even if they don't come out and they say it's like interdimensional or extraterrestrial or terrestrial or anything like that. I think I do agree with you. I think even that is huge, and that is going to be massive going forward, because it kind of finally acknowledges it, which is kind of feels like the last kind of like 50 years. That's what people have been trying to like fight for too, I think, which is good.
Yeah, and even if they did come out right and go, okay, it's ET, a lot of people wouldn't believe that.
Yeah.
But in 2021, you know what it's like. It would be nah, conspiracy, no, this is the fake alien stuff, no, and it would just be, here we go again.
Yeah.
So it's baby steps to get to that sort of conversation. And do you know what? Maybe it's not ET. Maybe what they have evidence of isn't ET anyway. Maybe they know that could be part of it, but it's like, okay, what's ET about it? We don't know. We just know it's something else because it's coming in from space. Okay, so you've got potentially some of this stuff from satellites based in space, which Chris Mellon mentioned in his 17 questions for the Congress.
Yeah.
About that sort of data, because what we've got right now, and I talked about this on my podcast last week, that we have reports, and we've come a long way in a short time to have this, and it's just the Twitter generation. We don't appreciate how much we've got in a short time, right?
Yeah.
And we're finding out we've got these objects coming in from 80,000 feet, not because that's where they start. That's the height. That's the net of the range of the radar. Yeah.
That's like the top of the dome that they're coming through kind of thing, isn't it?
That's it, yeah. So they drop from that height to the seabed, but then we're also finding out that they're not the seabed, but they're just above the ocean, but then we're finding out they're being tracked under the water as well. That's still, it sounds incredible, but it still leaves you enough ambiguity that, well, that could be just new US tech or secret Russian or secret Chinese, right? When you start, and what I'd say, what if, so we'll talk about that Tic Tac event, what if they came out and said, do you know what, as well as the data that shows it was under the water and 80,000 feet to the sea in 2 seconds, we actually tracked it coming in from space. That changes the conversation, because then you're like, right, okay, so where in space did it come from? Well, actually, it came from past the moon.
Yeah.
Or actually, we tracked it coming in from here. That's conversations that would totally change. Maybe they don't have that, though. Maybe these things manifest in space, and it's easier to do that and come in. You know, that's goes way down the rabbit hole, right? But
yeah,
that's the kind of, I think, next steps that would potentially change that conversation as to what it comes from and why. But right now, we're getting a lot of information, but still enough that any of it still has to be considered that, well, it still could be US tech. I know Chris Mellon, Elizondo, all those guys are sitting on news channels, and I don't believe it is, but there's just enough there that you still can't decide one way totally or another, because even though they come out and say the US government wouldn't test this stuff on its own people, can you ever trust a government that much? Probably not, right?
Yeah.
Especially if it's as secretive as it is. But I think that opens up for me that what we get from this report just has to be more funding, more mainstream science to get involved. Do the media keep the attention on it? The media might drop their interest in this for a while, just depending on what happens going forward. But I think it's going to be an exciting week. The build-up might not totally make it to the anticipation. Might not kind of fully match what happens at the end of the day, but I'm quite excited for it.
Well, it's like Lou said as well, isn't it? Like, it takes more than 180 days to even like renovate a kitchen and stuff sometimes. So like for them in 180 days, whilst we're in a pandemic where people aren't in the office, people are working from home and stuff, like that's really hard to like produce a report that's in depth, which is something that could like completely change how humanity views the universe as well. Like it's not something to be took lightly. So I'm kind of in agreement with you. I feel like it's more so we're going to have to like look at how it's worded and like the things that they say more so than they're going to straight come out and be like, ET's here and has always been there or something crazy like that.
They had their hands behind their back for a lot of it. Yeah, that time scale. And that was interesting when I spoke to Lou back in February it was now. And he was starting to mention that at the time, that it wasn't enough time. And I don't think a lot of people had really considered that. We just think, oh, this is great, a report's coming out. And he's going, yeah, but it's... maybe it's not what we need just yet. And like you say, like if you're renovating a house in 180 days, imagine after 90 days, the guy who's in charge of the project leaves and someone else comes in.
Yeah.
And the guy coming in is really nice and has the best intentions, but he now has to build relationships with all those builders. And, you know, the electricians aren't happy with what the plumbers are doing, and the plumbers don't want to sort anything until the joiners have finished this. And that's essentially what's happening right now. Is this task force is a small team. I think, I might be wrong, that it's 5 people.
Yeah.
They are trying to put together all of this information from different departments within, you know, the United States government. And it's not a case of, okay, what have you got? Send us it over. How you ask for it and how you word it is huge in all this stuff, and what they're getting isn't necessarily what they're asking for. And that's come out as well. So I'm seeing enough, though, from people that we should be pleasantly surprised, as long as your expectations aren't sky high.
Yeah.
Which I think is where I put myself straight from the off with this.
No, yeah, I'd agree with you. That's kind of where I'm at. I'm trying to stay a little bit calm. I'm excited because, you, like you're saying, you don't know, something could, but I do agree with you. I think it's going to be more on the lines of what you were saying, and it's kind of going to be like, what do we do with this now? Like, where do we take it from here, kind of thing. But just a little quick question first, because I've seen all of this today. I was wanted to get your thoughts on it, since it's kind of like hot at the moment. Have you seen this current story being reported about a Tic Tac being seen over the United Kingdom? What are your thoughts on that? Because I was having a look at it, and obviously it's the sun first, so I wasn't sure if it was like somewhere that you could like go for that kind of stuff, and I was just interested in seeing what you had to say about it, if you had anything.
Yeah, so it looks like a Tic Tac. well, at least that oblong sort of shape. And it's funny, like Alex Dietrich, who was involved with Commander Fravor and the David Fravor and that incident, has come out and said that the artist impressions, it wasn't the way a tic, because everyone just puts a tic tac, but like a blown up version of it. But she said it was longer.
Okay.
It wasn't quite, that round tic tac. It was longer with two rounded ends like a tic tac. And someone done an artist impression of it like that, and she went, "Yes, that is more like what we saw." And that's what it looks like in these pictures. It's that longer, almost not cigar shape, but it's got the round edges like a kind of stretched out tic tac.
Kind of looks like a pill almost, doesn't it? But like a long pill.
Yeah. And I took a picture a couple of weeks ago where I was literally driving along the road, and it was like almost stationary traffic, right? Which is why I'd got my phone and I looked up, and there was a little, and this is going to come back to the question you asked me, right? It's not just a random story. There was a little kind of dark point up in the really bright blue sky with some white cloud, and it was just sitting hovering, and there was birds and stuff flying about, but this was obviously quite high up, and you're looking, and the interest I've got, and like you've got, you must look up and be like, "Oh, what's that? Oh, it's a plane. Oh, it's a bird. Oh, it's a satellite," right?
Yeah.
We all do it. But when you have an interest, that's what you do. You walk into trees and fences and everything like that when you've got an interest in this, okay? Yeah. But I looked up and I was like, and I kept looking as I was very slowly crawling along in the traffic, and it didn't move. It was still just sitting next to this cloud, and I was like, it's not flying. It's okay. It's just outside Newcastle, so it's near the airport, but that is just hovering up there, whatever it is. It's just stationary. Could be a bird, and it's the angle of the sun, all that, whatever. I got my phone out, and I couldn't look to take a picture because I'm driving in a 3-lane motorway, right? And I just put the camera, and I looked very quickly as, okay, that should be in shot. And I hit, take a picture. And that was it. I couldn't look at the picture, but I looked up, and it was still there, okay? I got home a couple hours later, and I went to look at the picture to show my wife, who obviously knows about the podcast and all, but it's still like, all right, okay, magic. And I went, there was something up in the sky next to this cloud, like a little black dot, and I'm just going to see if my cameras took a good picture. And I look at it, and it wasn't there. But I was zooming in to look, but not in the same place, but over to the left of it, there was tic-tac shaped object. And I've got, I don't know if you saw it on Twitter, but I'll share it, yeah. And it clearly looks like a tic-tac. So that was not what I was taking a picture of. That wasn't there when I took the picture.
How interesting.
It just looks like something was flying past. So it's either like a plane, which is turning, and just with the angle and the quality of the camera and all that stuff, you don't see any wings or tail. I sent it to one guy straight away who on Twitter, Scott Brown, who does some analysis and stuff like that of these things, and healthy skeptic, I would say Scott is. And I sent it to him straight away, and I was like, go and just have a look at this for me, because that's not what I was taking a picture of, yet it's in the camera.
Yeah.
He looked at it and went, look, quality of the picture, all that kind of stuff, it's very hard to tell. He went, honestly, it looks like there might be a little bit of a tail when I zoom in. However, if there's a tail, it's upside down, which means it's not a plane.
Yeah.
So quite clearly, unless you've got a plane doing loop-the-loops up in the sky, which is unlikely. So even he was like, could be anything, good catch. That was it. So that's where it's sort of been left. So I go back to the picture that was in the newspaper where you've got to go, it looks like what we want it to be. Yeah. One of those tic-tac type objects. But is it just a plane turning and with the sunlight and the angles? And that's all the stuff you have to try and keep an open mind to, that it could just be the angle or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good timing, and it's probably interesting that the UK press are just starting to pick up on this stuff now, and even using that language of, look at one of these tic-tac UFOs that they've been talking about in America now for a couple of years. Well, actually, I suppose in America, in the mainstream, it's only been a couple of months that they're really hearing tic-tac UFOs on a regular basis. CNN, Fox, Good Morning America, all these shows are talking about it on a regular basis now as well.
Yeah.
So that's when it starts to bleed over here. Not the sniff of it, but it has to be a elongated time. It's covered in the press, and all of a sudden it comes over to us. Like you say, it's the Sun. In the UK, the Sun's got a lot of connotations as a tabloid.
Yeah, with some
paper.
Clickbait stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that I find super interesting about this topic is how there are like different shaped crafts and sightings. Like, it's not so much like anymore like everybody sits there and says, oh yeah, it's the flying, like a shimmering flying saucer, a metal flying saucer. Like there are people that see black triangles, there are people that see like tic tacs, there are people that see like stuff in like even like the Phoenix Lights like incident where you've got something massive that can be seen from like miles away outside the city and stuff. And that's what interests me, because it's like when you look at like humans, like we do create different types of aircraft. Like we don't just have one aircraft because if it's not broken, don't fix it kind of thing. So where my like interested in that is like, well, if they're different, then surely they've got different purposes too. Do you know what I mean? They're not going to build like 10 crafts that are all look completely different and do the same thing kind of thing. Because like we discussed on the Infinite Void podcast, shout out in a different podcast, like you were saying how like Christopher Mellon kind of like reacted to that idea when he was being asked about like the black triangles maybe possibly surveying like the earth and stuff.
Yeah.
And I sometimes think about this with like the tic tac, because it looks so like unconventional.
Like a drone. It's a drone.
Yeah, like a drone or like a planetary probe. Like we would send it to a planet to investigate that planet, and maybe it can like print material or like do something, or it's like AI, it's got AI and it's controlled itself and it just sends the data back. But it's like you were saying, I don't know, I feel like with the tic tac I just get this feeling that there's like nobody inside it. I don't really ever get that it's like a traditional UFO or like it's a spacecraft. I kind of get this feeling that it's almost autonomous with like the way it acts, and like with the way that it can have like the incredible maneuver speeds and stuff that it's got. Because like that blew my mind when I was I can't remember who he was talking to, but when Christopher Mellon was like talking about like the G's and stuff that the tic tac was pulling in like 600 G's with like right angle turns and stuff, and like that's crazy. And like even if it is using like warp drive technology or it's like bending space-time around itself, like that's still crazy for like any biological thing to be inside of. And I find it really interesting, because I almost feel like maybe all of these crafts have got different purposes, or maybe they are just kind of like upgraded versions of the last one. Like maybe the flying saucers were like generation 1 in the 50s and now they've kind of all upgraded kind of thing.
Yeah, so I've thought about this and talked about it a few times and kind of changed my opinion on it. So there's different conversations to have with it though. As the first one is, they're more than likely not all from the same place.
Yeah.
So it's not, okay, they're all coming from Mars, for example, right? Yeah. And like you say, they've got different purposes. So one of them does this, one of them does this. That's probably not the case. So they're potentially coming from different planets, different solar systems, but then you get into from different realities or different dimensions.
Yeah.
Maybe some of them are from here. I think that's quite likely that, and I think I used on Infinite Void, shout out again, Infinite Void, about the whole Wakanda type thing, that there's a good chance, and when you've got the guy who ran the ATIP program, Lou Elizondo, sitting on Fox, and the Washington Examiner article that was come out recently saying that maybe these things, some of them are here already.
Yeah.
Bob Bigelow famously said these things are right under our nose once. So, and that's maybe looking going, yeah, so maybe some of them are here. Yeah. And it's different species or beings, different technologies. I think when you look at the nuts and bolts stuff versus the consciousness side of it as well, okay? If you've got flying saucers that might be visiting from other planets, right? Good chance that happens. The little green men type scenario, okay?
Yeah.
Or little grey type beings. Maybe they're like third generation artificial intelligence clones, something like that, right? Not even beings that have travelled themselves. So it doesn't matter if they crash and they don't die, they're just empty
vessels,
sort of thing. Yeah, there's no solar consciousness to them necessarily. Avatars type things, right? And then you've got the idea like the Tic Tacs, much more smooth, modern looking stuff, and given the way they move, like you say, the lack of consistency to the movement and strangeness to how they were observed, the ping pong effect when it was just on top of the water going doo, 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 as if it was a ping pong ball inside a glass, then maybe that's like an artificial intelligence where it's and the breaking in the water, so maybe there was something under the water.
It's almost like a sensory thing, isn't it? Kind of like it's just reacting to its environment almost.
Maybe it's struggling to react to its environment.
Yeah.
And it's just like not sure what to do. So we look at it and go, why is it doing that? Well, why not? Like, it's just, maybe that's just, it's not sure what to do right now when it's just sitting. But then when it realizes something's there, it changed and And even like, it was quite funny. My co-host Dan, shout out to Dan, he was talking about how people haven't picked up on the movement that Alex Dietrich mentioned, that it tumbled. It's not that the object was it when it was coming up, or one of its movements, but he used like, imagine like a mobile phone or a cell phone for any American listeners, on its side, like, and then just twisting it. That's how it was moving. It wasn't that it was just moving front to back, like the nose of it pointed up and traveled, and people miss those kind of details because that's not how our aircraft don't do flips all the way along the Atlantic.
Yeah.
It just travels in a straight line, with the wind and the current underneath it. And that's the way some of these seem to move. So you've potentially got nuts and bolts craft with beings inside. You've potentially got nuts and bolts craft that aren't manned. You've potentially got even things like, and when you talk about these things haven't been considered properly yet, maybe some of them are like living things. Like people talk about orbs, or the way some of these craft change and stuff. Maybe they're technically alive some way, I don't know. And then maybe if they're coming through from different realities and different dimensions, again, that's a whole other thing to consider, that they literally materialize here. And the reason we see them different through the years is because they're always ahead of our technology at the time. And I know you have to play devil's advocate and go, well, there's an argument there that people are making it up, because what you see in the 40s and 50s, it's always like, you look at it now and it looks outdated, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But maybe that's because it's just enough that you can understand that this isn't yours, but it's advanced, and it's just enough for you to comprehend.
Yeah, it's kind of like the beings would, like, if they do exist, kind of thing, are like projecting what the zeitgeist could handle. And like in the 50s and 60s, there was this idea of like Martians on Mars and stuff. So they kind of like would have had this like stainless steel saucer, because all the rocket like concepts and stuff then were these stainless steel rockets and all that kind of stuff. So I get what you mean. And something that I also kind of find really interesting now that you've said that too is also like when you look through history, when like people would claim that they see like stars in the sky move, or like dragons or chariots of fire and stuff. It's like you're saying, maybe they were around then too, and they were just projecting something that the humans of that time would be able to comprehend, kind of thing.
That's the whole Eric von Daniken thing, Chariots of the Gods, where it's all these stories from Egyptian times, and starmen coming down and gods coming down in blazing chariots and stuff. Like if you saw back then a Tic Tac or a flying saucer or whatever coming down from the sky, you would be, it's a chariot, because how else do you describe it?
Yeah,
it's just like that was what was there for the time.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because then like that could just open up the door though to like a completely different history for like humanity. Do you know what I mean? It would be crazy if something like that ended up being true, because that is something weird about the human race. Like we have this weird amnesia to our history. Like we don't really know where we came from. I know we have like ideas, and you've got like evolution and all of those kind of things, but like we still have some things where we land like, yeah, that is kind of weird. How did these people move from that continent to this continent, and how did everybody kind of build a similar kind of structure even on different sides of the earth when they weren't in communication with each other and stuff like that?
Different pyramids and that, the Aztecs, like the Mexico and Peru and Egypt, and how these things line up to the stars the way they do. That would be so hard for us to build something like that now. Yeah, with the precision. Yeah, they managed to do it back then, and I think I totally attest to that. That you've got to look at the idea that maybe some of these things are just coming back to check on us.
Maybe we're maybe we're just like a giant petri dish, and they want to make sure the experiment doesn't blow itself up.
Listen, I talked about this before. I done like a Room 101 podcast, right? Was it on the Room 101? I can't, or was it the Theories podcast, right, with a couple of guys? It was Undead Gaucho, Dave Partridge from Shadows Magazine, and Dan, and we were all talking about different theories as to where these things may be from and why and stuff. And we talked about like simulation theories, right? And it's quite an interesting one. And you look at like the Matrix and that whole idea of how things work, right? But we talked about like, imagine someone was playing a game of The Sims, right? Or you start a game of Sims with like 3 of your mates, or like a party. That sounds like probably a bit of a geeky party, right? But still, you're kicking back with the latest Sims game, right? And with the 4 of you, you're all different people, right? And you start the game the same, and you've got the little basic town or city or house, whatever it might be. But like, you've all got different ideas of how you want it to go. One of you's probably got no interest from the start, right? Just do whatever you want.
Yeah.
The other three are probably quite interested from the get-go, and you start with the same ideas, but then very quickly, I want to do this, I want to do this. Then one of you kind of loses interest. So then it's just the two of you that are left, and one of you's going, do you know what? Kill everyone. Bomb the place. Can you bomb it? Is there like a bombing option? Oh, no, we're not going to do that. Let's see how it goes on. And imagine like weeks later, you go back to the game, and then you're going to have different, oh, this is how it's going. What should we do? And you've all got different ideas of what to do with it. Maybe that's the same with these objects or beings and different entities, where some of them care, some of them don't. Some of them go the other way, where it's like, I would rather run this into the ground.
Yeah.
And do you know what? When you look at the state of like the planet and everything that's going on, could you blame anyone who kind of set this up as an experiment, almost looking, going, oh, they are not doing well at all here, are they? Like, let's hit the restart button.
That's interesting that you say that as well, because like, even with like the whole like interest that they have, I say that I don't know what they are, but like they have like this interest with like nuclear capability, say, and it's interesting that some of them get turned off, some of them get turned on. Like, that's quite describing that kind of mentality, where some might care, some might think, let's deorbit the moon and finish them off, kind of thing, because they've kind of gone too far down this line. So yeah, that's weird, but then maybe at the same time, they could have maybe evolved from a civilization that has never experienced violence, and maybe we're the only civilization in the universe that has violence. So they're like, let's go and watch this crazy show. Let's go to Earth Zoo Day or something like that.
Or it's even like, maybe it's just like you're doing this wrong. It's like you've got the idea, so you've found this nuclear energy, nuclear fusion. Okay, cool. That can do some really good stuff. Why have you stuck it in this rocket? You've got it at the wrong end. It should be at the propulsion end, not at the end, not at the tip that blows up, right? And it's like going back to like the 50s and 60s, or even before, like, and I'm going to use terminology I hope I get right. Like when people would hit their kids with a switch, like a stick, not a Nintendo Switch, right, for anyone who's too young, but like a stick. And you imagine if you've got like kids, and people don't really hit their kids these days, right? This also sound terrible, but if you've got a little kid running about and they find a stick and you let them play with the stick to do whatever they want, right? And then imagine the kid hits an animal or hits their brother or sister or something, right? The adult would normally take the stick off them, potentially smack them in the arm and go, how do you like it? Yeah. And you might give them another chance and go, there's a stick back, play nice. So when these things are flying about and they see nuclear weapons and they turn them on and off, it's like that's not what you should be doing. Yeah. So launch one of these if you want. We'll just turn it off. And you go back to like the boom in... no pun intended, but like back in like Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and the tests that were done in the 40s out in like White Sands, New Mexico and stuff like that. I think there was a lot of nuclear and atomic and hydrogen bombs all being blown up in a short period of time for the first time in history. And I think when you look at different realities and dimensions being potentially part of this, we knocked on a door, like a bit of a kind of cosmic door. And I wouldn't be shocked if some of these entities or beings started looking through going, what are you doing? Yeah. And maybe that goes out to space, maybe it doesn't. I don't know, right? I'm not a physicist. But even if you look at some of these beings or objects potentially sharing this planet, if someone who cohabits this planet but doesn't realize it starts knocking on the door of like nuclear energy, and you start to go, no, don't be doing that. And maybe that's why they showed more of an interest after that it's like the kids have found the matches, what they're going to do with them. Yeah.
Well, it's like you said as well, like, because I love simulation theory and like the idea of like multiverses and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if it's because I'm a bit of a Marvel fanboy, but I love all that kind of stuff. And it's like you're saying, like one of my favorite like thought experiments is like kind of like you're saying with Sims, but the way that I've always like approached simulation theory is if you imagine everybody gets a copy of Sims, now that's their own universe, but maybe these beings have figured out how to jump from their copy to your copy. Maybe there's only one intelligent life form on each copy, and that intelligent life form has its evolution on Earth. Like maybe there are infinite versions of realities and we all share Earth, but it's only nuclear that has that knock on the door effect to the other ones. And maybe a few of them have figured out how to jump from a copy to another copy. And that's kind of science around it. But another kind of thing that I also find interesting is the idea that they could also be like maybe humans or AI from the future too. I find that kind of interesting though, where they might be looking back at where we went down that nuclear path. I know that's kind of like a weird one to think about, but that also kind of scares me too, because then if it was something like that, we the future's bleak.
I subscribe to that a lot less, particularly now. But what I do put some kind of weight behind is the idea that some of these beings experience time in a different way to us.
Yes.
And potentially for them, and this is where, like, people talk about, okay, so we've seen these objects in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and there's talk of like tic-tac shaped objects being around for 70 years, okay? Well, why are they just kind of, what are they doing over 70 years? Why are they just hovering about? Maybe it's not 70 years for them.
Yeah.
Maybe it's 10 minutes. And when they go away and do whatever they do and come back, 20 years, 50 years has passed for us, but it's like 10 minutes. Maybe they're just coming up and going, yeah, what's happening now? It's just 10 minutes for them, and we'll keep going back to The Sims, okay, since we've started it, where you can move stuff forward. Maybe for them, the game's just move forward a bit, and they're looking, going, right, where are we at?
Yeah.
That could literally be it.
Yeah, true, because, it's like you're saying, they could take like an approach where it's like out-of-the-box approach, where instead of like traveling from point A to point B, it's like, well, we'll just wait for point B to move to us, and we'll just sit outside of time or something like that. Or we experience time differently kind of thing, and when you're in the craft and it warps whatever it does, it could do something like that. Because it's like you're saying, like with science and stuff, with the whole like black hole thing and the heavier gravity is and stuff, time does seem to slow down or speed up depending on how much gravity is involved. And if it is like warp drive technology, or they are physically bending space-time, then that could, like you're saying, that could completely change what relative time zones are to them and everything like that.
And there's a chance it's none of that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that's what we understand, and we go, whoa, what if they were doing this, right? And it's that the gravity bubble or bending space-time. You talk about the fist on the mattress, like Bob Lazar talked about. Put a bowling ball on a mattress and it's hard to move on its own. Put your fist in front of the bowling ball, the ball will fall forward. Keep moving your fists quickly enough, the ball will keep moving, right? Maybe they're doing that, but maybe it's none of that stuff, and it's literally like, we can't think of how they move. And like I talked on a what if episode, what if they're not flying like we understand?
Yeah.
You move up in the air, and maybe that's just how they exist. That there is no flying to them. It's just they just move in different dimensions. Maybe there's not an up and down, left or a right. And again, we always have to put the human element of things into this. And I think that's where a lot of the conversation gets pigeonholed. And for a mainstream, that conversation is nowhere near ready to happen. We're looking at this report and talking about that, and it brings you right back down to earth, literally, right? Pun intended there. But you have to then maybe start looking, and this is where I wish I was intelligent and really clever to be able to go into like the physics world or quantum physics and all that kind of stuff, to really look at, let's throw all that, what we understand, out the window and forget about moving up, down, left and right.
Yeah.
And it's, again, when I think, and more recently I've talked about, why do these things move as fast as they do? Like, to them, are they actually moving fast? Do they exist at one point and then exist at another point? So there's no actual movement. It's literally just phases of existence.
Yeah.
And again, that goes back to how they're potentially experiencing time.
Because it's almost like you're saying, with some of them, they seem like they're frictionless and they're not being affected by anything. And it's almost like they're lowering their density so much that they kind of like don't exist in reality anymore. And then they're able to just kind of like travel through it, but not be in it, and then almost rematerialize wherever they want. But to us, it kind of just either looks like a ball of light, or they look the same. They can just kind of go translucent or whatever. It's really weird. And it's like you're saying, it's going to require like some really out of the box thinking, because I agree with you. And that's something that is also slowly changing, but is still quite a big problem too, is just, well, it's always been this way, so that wouldn't work kind of thing. Like I was having a discussion with a family member, and we kind of went down this road of like, but that's not how an aircraft flies. And it's like, these aren't aircraft, well, or they might not be, kind of thing. Like, don't put our version of physics on something, because our version of physics is only really 100 to 150 years old. Like, there are these beings, if they've had, or if whatever they are, I keep saying beings, but whatever they are, they could have had 1 million years. And imagine the scientific like explosion that they could have had. We've seen a technological boom in like the 50, and like, look what we've achieved in those 50 years. And you could say that like recorded society's been around for like however long it's been around, but there's really been a boom in like the last 50 or 60 years. And imagine what that's going to look like in another 2000 or in 1 million for us. And I think you mentioned this on the Infinite Void episode too, about like going back in time with like a smartphone and showing like somebody like that, it would be magic. And this is kind of a similar situation. And I think I heard this on one of your episodes on That UFO Podcast, when you were talking about like it could even be like how a fish moves like through water. It's not necessarily like traveling, it's just different dimensions of like travel almost. It's like it's not going up or down, it's just traveling through that space kind of thing.
It's funny, we're stuck, aren't we? Like you mentioned the fish one, like in the water, the fish, again, is there's not really an up or down or left or right for the fish. It just goes through the water.
Yeah.
And then you come out of the water and we're stuck on this bit where it's like you just move left and right, don't you? Like Sonic.
Yeah.
I'm just going to the computer game analogies. I don't know why. But then you go into space and it changes again to there's no up, down, left, right. And it's funny in space. And this is where I look at some of these organizations like SETI or anyone with a satellite looking for ET, and they're pointing in one direction. And as that small point they're looking at kind of spreads out, you're missing out almost everything else.
Yeah.
And it's like, so where are you looking? Like, how do you know in that tiny little bit you're looking at there's anything there or what you're even looking for? So yeah, it's that whole thing of like, we keep trying to put the human aspect of it on this. This is what we understand. So what would be really advanced for us? And even then, if you go away from the nuts and bolts side of the conversation into the consciousness side of it, if you're then dealing with some of this being really, really advanced beings that aren't even physical anymore, there's no science behind it in the sense that this stuff just exists.
Yeah.
Well, how did he move the craft? Because it just does. How is it propelled? It's not propelled by anything. It's just like, and it's like that famous quote, isn't it? That at one point, like magic just becomes science, or science just becomes magic.
Yeah.
And you just keep going along the line. And like I used that analogy with you, didn't I, about the smartphone going back. But if you gave yourself a smartphone 25 years ago, it would have blown your mind.
Yeah.
Like I remember as a kid seeing was it the Sega? What was the handheld Sega that came out? Not the Master System, not the Genesis. No, not Genesis. Sega Game Gear, right?
Game Gear.
Sega Game Gear came out, and some people were like, "What?" But I remember it had an adaptation on the Game Gear, because all you could do on a Sega Game Gear, no internet connection, there was no internet, right?
Yep.
You could play the game, and it was the most amazing thing to have a handheld, big, chunky, but it was like a Sega on it. It was incredible, right? And do you remember the adaptation you could get that you could tune in TV?
Yes.
It had a big aerial that came off it,
Yeah.
and it was just the most amazing thing. The picture was always terrible because it was on like a tiny little screen, right? But imagine going back to yourself then and giving yourself like an iPhone now,
Yeah.
or a Samsung S21 or something like I've got, right? And being like, look at that, and you'd be like, you wouldn't even know what to do with it. But that's like 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And we're looking at this stuff going 50, 100, 1,000, 2,000 years down the line. And then, like you say, what if it's not even time is the issue, that these things have literally evolved to a level where they're not even physical anymore? And I think that's where you start looking at, and to some people it might sound, I think, like we've jumped about a lot here in the conversation, and we probably have, but that's my fault. The idea is, though, that there's a lot of stuff probably going on that in my journey in this hasn't been, and it started off as, we've got aliens probably coming from other planets. But yeah, what if there's aliens, but what if there's stuff here already? What if there's stuff coming from different dimensions, different realities? What if there's beings that you would consider godlike, who are just another step along, like, evolution of consciousness? And then I love the question, you go down another rabbit hole of, do they know about each other?
Yeah.
How do you go that one?
No, that's a very good point. And when you start going down those kind of things, though, like anything's possible too. Do you know what I mean? Because like, even if you look at it from like a science, like an astronomy standpoint, like my mum and dad in school were taught about the solar system, and that was pretty much it. There were the planets. You had like Mars, Venus, Mercury, Neptune, Saturn, Jupiter, all those, the sun, and that was kind of it. And like in the last 4 years, we've like found like 4,000 something exoplanets that are within the habitable zone of just our galaxy, and there are billions of galaxies. And it just kind of gets like, it gets a little bit fractal almost, like you just keep almost zooming out and there's something bigger, zooming out and there's something bigger. And I'd agree with you. I think the universe is so huge. I think we are quite arrogant to think that it's just us. I can understand why people think, oh, well, life definitely exists, but maybe it hasn't visited Earth kind of thing. I can get the approach that some people have with that. But there's so many possibilities. Like, it might not just be aliens. It could be interdimensional, or like there could be multiple realities, and there could be multiple versions of the same kind of species, but they've all just had different evolutionary paths, and they've all figured out how to like jump and all this kind of stuff. It's a little bit insane.
Do you remember the end of Men in Black?
Yes.
The very end, and the camera zooms out and it zooms out and it goes to the solar system and then the galaxy and the universe, and it turns out we're just in a marble with some alien beings playing with this set of marbles. And that's it. And it's like, it could be something as stupid as that. I mean, not that's incredible, but it just you literally, it means nothing in the grand scheme of things. It's such a little insignificant thing. And it's you look at, again, the state of the planet and all the kind of stuff, the fighting, the wars, all that kind of stuff that goes on, and all the issues there is, and how so many people have so little and such a small portion of us have a lot. And even the smaller portion have even more money. And you hear these astronauts that go into space, and they almost always say the same thing, that they go up to space, and when they look back and see the planet, their whole view in life just changes.
I think that's called the observer effect, isn't it?
And it's just like, what's the point? And it goes into that maybe happy-go-lucky, fluffy version of what's the point in war? What's the point in fighting? And you must get those guys on the space station looking, going, you're Russian, you're Chinese, I'm American, I'm Canadian. What? Why are we fighting over this? I mean, look at it. That's incredible. But
and like any civilization that is spacefaring, and if any of them are coming here, they definitely are. Like, they're gonna have that approach, and that's gonna be kind of like one of their main like philosophical things, is like, look after what you've got, because they've probably seen throughout the universe people that don't and people that do and all that kind of stuff, and they probably do look at Earth and they think like, why are you destroying this? Or maybe if we disable this or show up here, it's kind of like a nod kind of thing. It's unless it goes full-blown Independence Day and some of these things that are here for reconnaissance are just checking what we can and can't do, and the bigger stuff still to come. I think Chris Ballard said that on a Joe Rogan episode, didn't he? He was like, yeah, maybe they've got like stock in some of our materials and they don't want us to destroy it. They're like, that gold's for us when you guys are gone, thank you very much.
Or that gold's for us when you are gotten rid of.
No, totally. So I was going to ask you, have you had like any experiences or sightings? You mentioned at the start that you took a photo of something that looked like a Tic Tac, but have you had anything that like changed you?
So I was about 10. People are going to hear this story now if they've listened to me a few times, and I'm probably going, he said 11 last time. I was between 9, 10, 11 years old, right? Leaving, like, we had the BB in the UK, like the Boys Brigade. I used to be part of that. And I was leaving there one night. It's like the Scouts for anyone in stateside or anyone else listening that doesn't know what the BB is. And I was leaving there with my friend and my mum, my sister and his mum. And we were crossing the road in a really built up area. It's just all houses and community centre and busy road, shops, all that kind of stuff. Wasn't big fields or expanse or anything like that. It's right in kind of urban Glasgow, I suppose, like a weird way of saying it, but it's all built up. Everywhere you go, it's houses and motorways and all that kind of stuff. So there's no space. And in the distance, about half a mile down the road, there was a big object. It looked like a Ferris wheel, but kind of on a very slight angle. So I suppose for you, you'd be like that. Just maybe 20, 30 degrees, but spinning ridiculously quick.
Was it like one colour or like multicolored?
I'm colorblind for a start, right?
Oh, okay.
So, but I just remember kind of bright lights, like all white. I don't remember it being like blue, red, yellow, all that kind of stuff, right? Not Close Encounters of the Third Kind type. But it was on its side and it was firing round, but like far too quick to be like a Ferris wheel or something like that, right? Because one, I know where it was. It was in an area that's kind of just like a football pitch and a community centre and all that kind of stuff, a leisure centre. So it wasn't going to be like a fair or anything like that, okay, in a carnival. We would have known about it as well, given it was literally next to where I stayed, because I could walk 5 minutes from my house to the church hall we were in. And this thing was just there on its side, kind of spinning, really, not in the sky, like almost on the ground. You couldn't see the bottom of it for the trees, put it that way, okay? Or the houses. And I remember, like, we all saw it, and my mum and that were like, oh, look at that kind of thing. And when you wish you could go back to a point in time and just take a walk along the road and be like, look at that, and what is that? And it was the mid-90s, had no camera phones, nothing like that, and that was it. We just walked on home, and it was just there. Never saw anything leave, anything like that. It was just there. So for me, that was probably, and I had an interest in that kind of stuff anyway. I like mysteries and Egyptian pyramids and Loch Ness and all that. I enjoyed aliens, and that was something I loved as a kid. And I think for me, that just always stuck with me. That what was that? And then there's the whole, well, you think that would have been in the news? Well, we never talked about it. There's no, who do you report that to? Do you go home and phone the police? We didn't have mobile phones on us, like, but even then, you don't. Who do you tell? Especially
back then as well. Like it's a very different time, because I think you mentioned this too. Like British people are very much like no nonsense kind of approach when it comes to that kind of thing. So I can definitely imagine in the 90s, nobody reported that if they saw it.
And do you know what? Now you whip out your smartphone and you take a video that's probably quite bad anyway at that distance and doesn't look like what it looks like to your naked eye. It never does so. You know, like if you're standing at the beach and there's a beautiful sunset and this expanse, and you take out your phone, and no matter how good your iPhone 12 Pro Max is, or your S21 or your Huawei, your LG, you know, all that. Yeah. And I've got an 8K camera, and this one's like 5,000 megapixels, and you take it out on your phone and it just looks shit, doesn't it? You're like, that's not what I'm looking at. That's not what I can see. It just doesn't have the same, like, when you see it with your naked eye. But anyway, you would have taken a picture or a video, but there was nothing like that then. Yeah. So you just, what do? You just go on and go home. I remember though, I lived in a high-rise flat that was like 18 floors. If I had gone home and went round the back balcony on the flat, makes it sound far more exotic than it is. Balcony. It was like, you'll know the kind of high-rise flat I'm talking about in Glasgow, which is really rough. Like you would have been able to see down on this area where this thing was, but I was always too scared to do it. It probably wouldn't have been there at that time anyway, but maybe we, and again, it's like, I look back now and it's like, maybe we saw it and other people didn't, just because we were meant to see it.
Yeah, you get reports like that though, don't you, where like people like see things, like say on a motorway, for instance, and nobody else sees it apart from like a select few and stuff. And I find that quite interesting too, because it was like you were saying earlier about like consciousness and stuff, and maybe these craft are like consciously controlled, and if they're consciously controlled, then maybe they can also decide who consciously can see them, kind of stuff. But that's really interesting, because like for me, I've always kind of like believed, and I've always had like a massive interest in like ancient societies and like cryptids and like mythical stories and all that kind of stuff. And growing up like watching Marvel, being open to like the whole like space thing and the different civilizations and stuff, like I've always been interested, but I've never had an experience as much as I've wanted one. Like I've gone and sat on a mountain by myself and like really thought about it, and just kind of like camped out quite a lot, living in like mid Wales as a child and stuff. And I've never really seen anything. Like I saw once like a light in the sky, and it slightly moved, but I wasn't sure if I just imagined it because I wanted to see something so hard, or if it actually happened and like I'm just forgetting it. But yeah, I find it really interesting hearing people's stories, because like a lot of people, when they have them, they in the moment don't like act on it. They're just kind of like baffled by it, and then the moment's over and they like really want to return to it, kind of thing.
You know that whole like human initiated contact, CE5, whatever you want to call it. I'm lucky to live in quite a rural area. There's a lot of kind of fields and stuff round about where I stay. They're slowly disappearing for houses, right, and big estates and stuff, but it's a pretty nice sky to look at. There's not a whole load of light pollution where I stay, considering I'm not too far from a city. And sometimes I go out the front of the house at night when I'm walking the dog and it's a clear night, and I'll spend the whole time looking up, just hoping to see big black triangle, saucer, disc, whatever. It's just on a light in the sky. And you see lots of lights that you see the satellites, and you can pick out the space station pretty quickly and all that kind of stuff. And again, if it just moves in a straight line, I have done the whole thing before and not meditating, not yoga, I don't do drugs, don't smoke weed, anything like that. Nothing against it, I just don't, right? Yeah. And I'm fat though, I've got a lot of crap, so it's not like, don't do drugs, eat chocolate. But I remember like I'll look up, and sometimes I'll just do the whole, even very quietly to myself, if there's anything up there, if you want to come out, I wouldn't mind seeing something, just kind of talking to the universe type thing. And there's been a couple of times where at that point, little light goes along. Ooh. But do you know what? I am not going to go, I have summoned some sort of craft or consciousness, because is it likely a satellite? Yeah, probably. Is it an aircraft traveling at speed? Probably. Is it some kind of Chinese spy plane that's up there? Probably. I don't know. Maybe it's just coincidence at the time. But there's been a few times I've went, okay, fair enough. That was pretty. That wasn't there before from what I could see. But there's a lot of stars in the sky, so it's always, I think, nice to go out and try that. If there's something there.
Yeah. See, I've tried CE5 once, but I wasn't really sure if I was like doing the correct approach, because like you're saying, I don't really do like meditation and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of took the approach where I kind of sat there and I was like, right, if there's something there, like I'm kind of like open to it. And then I was kind of doing like imagining Google Earth, like where I am on the planet, like I'm here kind of thing. And nothing came of it. And I kind of just put it down to the approach that maybe my partner wasn't down for it. So they kind of got that vibe kind of thing. But I do find it interesting. I would like to like do that once properly to see if anything like comes from it, because I did see that there were a few people doing it in South Wales not that long ago. Like there was a group of them that went to do it. I don't know if I'd do it with certain people that like make whole trips out of it in America and charge ridiculous amounts of money, but I am interested in that kind of like human initiating the contact as to like the craft initiating it.
My guest on my podcast I'm recording tomorrow is James Iandoli, who has Engaging the Phenomenon YouTube channel. Okay, really popular, lovely guy as well. And one of his main expertise is CE5, human initiated contact. And I've got a lot of questions for him like this, where I'm very wary of. I'm sure that this can work.
Yeah.
Okay, not necessarily the franchised CE5, which is paying for it, right? Which is all, like you say, that's, but even being in a group, right? Maybe those experiences are meant to be just for you.
Yeah.
And like you've said there, you've tried it once, but your partner was there, and maybe that doesn't help.
Yeah.
And maybe it's like the experience is you are having this experience, not the other people, not the group you're in, whether they've all got guitars and love beads and stuff around their necks and stuff and singing Kumbaya, right? It doesn't matter. Best intent and positive energy. Maybe it's just the experience is for you. And I'm going to ask him questions like that because I want to understand more in his thoughts and thinking. And it's just maybe for me I don't think I would even want to have that experience with a group.
Yeah.
Because for me, I think if you have the experience with a group, then why can't you stand outside the White House and summon something above the White House?
Yeah, no, totally. Like, why wouldn't you get people doing that? Like, kind of like an Extinction Rebellion kind of group, but they're CE5 and they're like standing outside like government buildings trying to initiate.
I interviewed Michael Mazzola, who is the director of Stephen Greer's documentaries, and I asked him, okay, so if Dr. Greer is so sure of his methods and these beings contacting him and the whole they're not a threat, they're friendly, okay, why not get a news crew, a live camera crew, who I'm sure you could get, he spends enough money and makes enough money on stuff.
Yeah.
So get a crew, tell them we are going to stand, even as a publicity stunt, we are going to be on this date outside the White House, outside some public landmark, and we are going to do a group CE5, because no doubt you would get a huge crowd for that as well, of people who want to do it, and go to Central Park, wherever it might be, and summon something in the sky live on TV. Because do you know what? You will then have an audience of millions and a new membership of millions if you can do it as well.
Yeah.
But it's the same reason, and when it comes to Scientology, Tom Cruise doesn't levitate live on camera because he can't, right?
Yeah.
Even though the level of Scientology he is at, he's apparently able to levitate, right? But we all know why he can't do that. So that's why people like Stephen Greer won't go on live camera and do it, and why they'll film it and show you it later off the coast of somewhere, just at the same time a private contractor flight has gone out and dropped flares. Okay, so that's why. And Michael Mazzola couldn't really answer that. It was, oh yeah, that'd be a really good idea. Well, yeah, it would. It's not even a good idea. It's just common sense.
Yeah, why hasn't it happened?
So that's where I would totally understand, though. And I know it's for the skeptic or the debunker. Of course, it'll only happen if you're on your own. But maybe those experiences are only meant to be for you. And I'm going to talk to James Iandoli about that kind of stuff tomorrow as well. So, because I've got a lot I would like to know about the ideas behind it and the thinking behind it and the rationale behind CE5.
It's kind of it's interesting as well, because you were mentioning earlier like maybe like beings from another dimension or like all that kind of like weird stuff. And CE5's kind of very similar to like that whole like paranormal kind of like seance kind of thing, like where you kind of like, you all sit with a group, you all kind of like chant a mantra or something, and then like, I don't know, you know, like when witches do it and then they claim that like stuff in the rooms get kind of like thrown around and stuff like that. It's quite interesting because it's kind of like it's like a similar approach, but it's like appropriated to the skies kind of thing, like a group of people sitting together and doing it. And yeah, I find it really interesting because I think the Nazis were into that, weren't they? Like occult stuff and like group seances and all of that kind of weird kind of, can you move stuff with your mind and like group mind thought and the zeitgeist and stuff like that. So I find it interesting, but I don't know, like if I'm like on the, like if I believe it, I'd have to like go and experience it with a group of people, or maybe I just don't have the right group of people to do it with.
Do you know even why I've got no issues believing in that kind of stuff, and even things like telepathy and that sort of a sixth sense, a force of nature, whatever it might be, everything being connected. If my dog can tell my wife is about to drive round the corner, then how does he know that, right?
Yeah.
So that even animals have that sixth sense, then why can't that stretch out further?
Yeah.
So like I'm all for that sort of stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm into like that whole kind of like telepathy kind of stuff and like ideas and how ideas come about and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like super interested with this like Neuralink stuff that Elon Musk is doing, because that could be a great answer to getting good quality UFO videos if you can like capture it by blinking your eyes looking at it, or like filming it that way, and it can just be stored to the cloud or something like that.
Yeah.
Or like even like being able to communicate on that kind of level, because I do agree with you, because it's funny because humanity is so open to disclosure, but we haven't even figured out really how to communicate with any animal on planet Earth yet. Like we can't sit and go, hey dolphins, so how's it going? Are you happy with how we're like treating the seas? Or hey, all the zebras of Africa, how are you doing like migrating these fields? You got enough grass and everything? Like we can't communicate with anything but humans, and it's like
and humans still struggle to communicate with each other.
Yeah, and like we can't even communicate with each other. And like if you were like a super intelligent race like looking at us, you would be like, how are we even gonna have a conversation? Like, and that's probably why they don't show up outside like the White House and stuff. Or maybe they do, I don't know. But it's interesting.
Even from a conversational point of view, there's theories about the Tic Tacs, and that they were actually like surveying the whales that are out that way, and there's like whale migrations that go on around about that area and Catalina Islands and stuff like that. Okay, there's a lot of like, massive whale pods, and you look again, if you say the Tic Tacs were AI on like a drone, and you arrive on this planet and you're looking for intelligent species, yeah, we are technologically the most advanced, right? But if these things are potentially looking for just animals that are spiritually advanced, or how they behave is the safest, then why wouldn't they go out in the oceans and be like, well, this planet's mostly water, so let's look there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, let's look at whales, and they communicate via sonar, and is it sonar for whales? It's dolphins. But yeah, however whales communicate and the way they talk to each other. But then, yeah, you might look at humans and be like, yeah, they've got a lot of tech, but they're not like a bit violent.
Yeah.
Not too bright. So we'll just leave them and go and look at like, the dolphins and whales, and maybe that would make sense to like something that wasn't manned as we know it, and they're just looking, going, yep, this planet is teeming with life, not just human, but there's monkeys and chimps and gorillas and whales and dolphins and elephants, and yeah, all this life's really cool. Why would we necessarily stand out?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I never thought about it like that, because like we do consider ourselves like the most intelligent, but it's like you're saying, maybe we're like not the most like consciously evolved or something like that, and there's something else that is, but it's just outside of our like, yeah, that's quite a good thought.
And I brought up recently as well, I was like, so just human nature, see if dolphins evolved all of a sudden and started building nuclear reactors, what would we do to dolphins?
We'd just go and wipe them out. We'd probably have a word. Well, we might try and have a word with them, but we'd probably just wipe them out.
Yeah. So that's just human nature. So why would any species visiting us treat us any differently?
Well, it's like when we go down to the Antarctic and like Greenland and stuff, and like these like poor like fish and penguins and stuff that just have this habitat that have never experienced humans before. The couple of humans just show up, kind of hover around, watch what they're doing, maybe take one or two and disappear and don't come back. And then those poor like penguin, he probably goes back to his group and he's like, did you see that? And they're like, no, we didn't see anything. What are you chatting about? And he's like, he's the crazy one then forever.
The one that's saying, do you know why our icebergs got a lot smaller recently? It's probably them.
It's probably them. They go, no, we're the only species on this planet. What are you chatting? Yeah, totally. Totally. Well, we should probably call it there because we've gone a little bit over. So thank you for coming on today. If you got anything that you want to promote with That UFO Podcast or UAP Media UK, I know you've got loads of interviews coming up. By the way, this is coming out like the week after the report. So everything that he's about to say will probably be out by the time you hear this, so you can go and check it out, and I'll put some links below. But yeah, so the report was great. It was disappointing. It was indifferent. You can delete as applicable. So yeah, if people can search That UFO Podcast on any platform, it's available on Spotify, iTunes, Podcast Addict, wherever you get podcasts. It's on YouTube. The catalogue's slowly being uploaded to YouTube as well. There's some video content. The rest of it's just audio. Upcoming interviews, I've got James Iandoli. I'll announce this now. I've not said this yet, but I've got Xiao Ma coming on, who is Chinese by birth but lives in Australia and is a lawyer, and I'll be talking to her about UFOs and China and all that kind of stuff as well. Cool. So speaking to her in a couple of days, someone who's not too well known. And then there's going to be a couple of shows as this is released about the task force report coming out. There'll be a kind of discussion group on it as well, and a few other podcasts. So so got some good stuff, and hoping to have James Fox announced for the next week or two as well. So that's been I'm going back and forward with him just now, just trying to get a date with him. So yeah, it's plenty coming out, and they can find, if they want to go on Patreon if they like it, it's on Apple Podcast subscriptions, but the podcast's always free, so they can find it wherever they find their podcast. That'd be great. And UAP Media UK, you can follow that on Twitter. If you check out uapmedia.uk is the website as well, particularly if you're based in the UK. It'd be great to kind of get some people involved in emailing, writing letters to local politicians and stuff, and journalists. That would be great. So yeah, I think you guys have started like dropping UK like UFO incident files, haven't you, as well, like little case files here and there and stuff. So that's super cool for anyone that is interested in that, because the UK doesn't get much love with that. I know there's like a few main ones, but the one that you dropped a couple of days ago I found really interesting. So the guys in the group chat are just talking about one right as we interview as well, to do with the debrief has a piece coming out on the 23rd of June, which will be out by now. Tim McMillan's doing a 4-part series on unidentified objects, and within the trailer for it there's a video of a light coming along. It's Cornwall, comes in from the right hand side. It's on a webcam, isn't it?
Yes, shoots up.
Yes.
But we're discussing that in the group just now, and there's a little bit of conjecture as to, look, it's probably a drone, and some of the guys have got reasons they think so as well, but we're going to try and put something together just to kind of clear that up as well. So yeah, cool. Keep an eye out on that. How
interesting. Well, thank you for coming on, and thank you everyone that's tuned in to listen, and we will catch you next week. Hi everyone, it's me again. I just wanted to say I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you want to follow us on social media, it's at Strange Times on Twitter and at Stranger Times on Instagram. So head over there and give us a follow to keep up to date with episode announcements and when new episodes are going to be dropping. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure to give us a nice review, because it helps with ranking and getting the podcast in the charts. And if you're listening on Spotify, make sure you're following us so you can be notified when new episodes come out. Thank you.